It's Friday. You know what that means? It's Tech Talk. Another round of Tech Talk, guys. Another round. Welcome. Good to see your faces. And we've got a special guest today. Mike, I'll leave it over to you. What kind of wizardry is Hayden going to talk about today?
Well, we've got Hayden in. He's going to discuss how to do some paperwork and things like that. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about machinery. Absolutely.
Cool.
So it's always nice to have Hayden on board and pick his brain and have a bit of a chat about some different machinery. We've put together a few different questions we thought we'd like to ask, but no reason that moving forward, if anyone else wants to put any questions in the comments that we can hit Hayden up for next time and things like that, we're always open.
Hayden, you've only been working around concrete grinding machinery for a very long time. Everyone goes out and buys these beautiful shiny things, and that's not the way you typically get to see your machines. You normally get to see them when they're rusted and dusted. You got to try and get the nuts and the bolts off them to pop them open and get them all serviced and rebuilt and everything. So knowing that you see them at their worst every day, once they've been flogged out and just about, on the edge of death, and it's your job to bring them back. I got a lot of respect for your side of the equation here, because you've got to bring them back all the time and make them run like new. So I wanted to know a couple of things. In particular, I want to know, probably the thing that I see going out all the time is the demo heads that you put on these machines. And I want to know, what's wrong with all the other machine heads?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned all this, Josh, because, we do see the machines at their best and the worst. Swimming pools are the worst for them. I've heard of too many vacuums that go for a swim, and I think there was a machine that decided to go for a dip in Port Phillip once upon a time. I don't know how, I don't know why, but there's some interesting things do happen to these machines. Heads. Obviously, we've talked about demo heads before. Everybody, in the PG land of machines, they know quite well from us about demo heads. So many other machines that can run demo heads on there. The different heads that are out there, demo heads are you got spring steels, which are pre-sprung tensioned heads. Then you've got like the cardan heads on the HTCs, rubber mounted, but just not as robust as what a demo head is. A demo head was really designed for, as the name says, demolition work, but it's not just for that. And I had someone yesterday asking me this question, basically saying, why I don't want to run demo heads on my machine because I mainly do polish. It's like, no. I know the name wasn't exactly perfect for this, but they will still run just as good on a polish as anything else. Look, issues with other heads, spring steels, they're pre-sprung, they're quite a thin spring steel on there. They do fracture. Josh could obviously tell you the long story of why they came about and how they came about. But at the end of the day, he doesn't want to go into that. That's fine. I understand that. And then you've got things like the cardan heads on the HTCs. Look, they're a reasonably good head, but when they do start to go, they start to lean off a bit or they twist. And from there, they're quite expensive to rebuild as well from a parts perspective. Back in the day, I think the HTC 500s had almost like a belt material that used to be in there, and there's 2 or 3 layers of that was helping the head do all these things. Again, it would get to go hard, it would split. The concrete dust, as we know, is horrible on anything that goes out there. So, a choice of what head you're going to put under a machine, that's a pretty substantial decision that you're making, from a purchasing point of view, plus lifespan, and servicing cost on those heads as well. So it's not just a flick of the switch of, I'm just going to go that one. There's a lot of info out there on all these heads and a lot of pros and cons between all of them. So, like I said, demo heads, we get them for HTC, Schwanborns. The list goes, I can't even think of all the machines we're now doing, but every day there seems to be a new machine that we're adapting them to. So there's, anyone and everyone can now start using them.
So, when we look through the list of questions, every now and then I find a question quite interesting because I really don't know much about it. I'm just kidding, it's not some of the time, it's most of the time. I look through most questions and I've got no idea what's going on. But no, this particular question, flat belts versus ribbed belts, sort of the pros and cons, and I guess your favourite out of the two.
Yeah, all right. So out in the machinery world, you've got flat belts, you've got ribbed belts and tooth belts out there. So all have a purpose, all have a reason. The flat belts are probably I prefer a flat belt on a machine. They're a bit more forgiving on a machine. So if you're grinding along and you hit a dynabolt, one pulley can go stationary for a moment and the belt can slide past it if it needs to. Right, so things like, breaking belts due to impact is a lot less. Doesn't say it doesn't happen. You can still break a flat belt from an impact break. When you go to things like a tooth belt, which I think a lot of the Schwanborns sort of run, really good. They're good for torque. There's no tracking issues, things like that. Pulley heights are not really as big an issue on those. They can sort of self-align, and from their point of view, they grab a bit better. But most of them are double-sided, so they're actually a laminated layer of belt that goes together. So heat is not a good friend of those, and they expand and eventually get a gap in there, and that becomes a weak point in the belt. Probably the most common thing we see happen to those belts is that they basically separate and then snap on those. Then you have groove belts, which is what a lot of the newer HTCs and PG versions coming out with. Again, a lot of that is around tracking of the belt. There's not as much need for tracking. Surface area does come into it, but the material of the belt also comes into it. They run in all the grooves on the pulleys, so the pulley to get grip has a groove, and that sort of movement, as you call it, is like on a fan belt on a car. It wears those ribs and grooves, so they don't really quite last as long as they could. But again, they're double-sided to run around both directions and things like that. So it does still again fall into a grip factor. But again, heat is another thing on those. Anything that's those rubbery sort of belt compounds, they're a lot less tolerant to heat as compared to what a flat belt will do in that. So the tensioning on a flat belt is big.
Is there one that stands out more than another for a cost factor at all? Or?
Look, it's certainly like anything though. You have good quality belts, you have cheap belts out there. So again, it's there's certain manufacturers that, for instance, that we choose when we do belts, just from our experience with them, our knowledge with them, and our background with these companies that we're working with. So yeah, there is definitely cost differences out there. Again, from the original manufacturers, what they're getting in from who knows where versus what we might get in as well. So there are definitely cost factors between all.
Yes, you want that cost versus quality, and you find that balance. Sorry, Josh, yep. I think I cut you off there, mate.
My question was around how much heat are these belts seeing? I think people realise that you tip the machine back and, I can't touch those diamonds, they're so smoking hot. Where does that heat all go?
Well, look, it's not just the diamond heat, Josh. So when we lock up a PG grinder in our in the bench in the workshop, we'll let it run for about 15 minutes. And if we get the temperature gun and put it onto the bearing or the cover surface just around the outside of the shaft there, we're usually up around 70, 75 degrees. And that's up to 15 minutes of running. So the belt itself creates heat. The bearings inside create heat. The diamonds on the outside create heat. The dust that's all around that being cut has heat. This all just absorbs through the machine. So when we say that certain belts aren't as tolerant to heat, there's a lot of heat going around these machines everywhere. So it is a big factor around how when manufacturers choose a belt, what kind of heat ratings and how close that heat rating are we getting, which again is why for the early PG grinders, the flat belt, it can handle that bit more heat. It will expand a little bit with the heat, but it does come back when it cools down. So. And you can tension them a bit more as well. So if you do have a belt that starts to slip, you can nip a little bit more tension, whereas a lot of the other belts you can't, for that same reason that once they've started stretching, they're starting to fail internally and things like that in the joins of the belt and the seams. So yeah, heat's a massive one.
Never realised I was pushing a pie warmer around.
Absolutely. Mate, fill it with water, put some hot dogs, lunchtime.
You can only get them in there.
Speaking of different machinery, different setups, things like that, the PG series comes with a planetary seals. The other series or the other machines don't. What's the deal with that? Why do we have the seals? Why don't we have the seals?
When you say others don't, a lot of the ones that don't are, majority of the time, a lot of the newer machines. There are a couple of manufacturers that have been running without them for quite some time. The Schwanborns haven't really had a planetary seal per se, inside the cover for a lot of their machines. The HTCs, all the early HTCs actually had them. They're a piece of foam that's in there. Probably never really lasted very long. Most people probably didn't even realise it had been put in unless they checked the invoice when they had it repaired and serviced. Disappear that quickly with a bit of grout and build up and things like that. So a lot of those machines that have a seal around the outside of the drum and against the side of the cover is to minimise what dust is getting up into the planetary drive area. So on the HCCs, it was belt driven up in the top. The PG grinders was chain and sprocket driven in there. So it was to minimise what went up there. I think from memory, a lot of the very, very first machines didn't have them in them, and it was an addition later on. So again, what it's about is minimising the total area around where your vacuum is going and bring that whole, there's a word for it, Josh, not cavity, what's the word there?
Yeah, you minimise the cavity.
Minimising how much is under there for what your vacuum has to effectively do. The more area there, your vacuum's trying to pull air from everywhere around, as compared to if you limit that down to just under the machine, your airflow under the machine can become a lot more velocity, which is going to pull dust away quicker. So that was the main thing, was stop stuff getting up into the top of the machine, and to minimise how much work the vacuum was trying to do inside that whole area. They're the big reasons why planetary seals were put in. A lot of the new machines, the new PG range, they don't have them in there, but they do have like a large oil seal up the top. But there's obviously encased all of the planetary gear up the top as well, which meant they didn't require the seal the same as the early ones did.
Again, I don't know. I seem to be the cost-sensitive one today. Is it a major, serviceable item, or is it just something that needs to be checked off and done on the way?
No, usually planetary seals are, they're part of a normal service on a machine. Look, we do find a lot of guys, HCCs again. They once they go on, they generally come off, and I don't see many HCCs actually coming with anything left. It's pretty rare that they actually have anything remaining. People don't even know when you mention planetary seal. PG guys, they probably know about them a bit more because they have had tendencies over the years to fail. And most of the time it's within the first day or two. So the urethane that's sticking it on just hasn't quite gone off enough before the machine's used, or they're put in the van and they've dinted the cover right where the seal is. That then causes friction and pulls the planetary off. So anyone with a PG grinder's probably had one go before, and then you're trying to pull all the bits out of it to keep yourself running. Again, to keep in mind, the machines didn't come out with them at the very, very first, and you can run a machine without it if you want to. It really comes down to you need to tip your machine back and clean it out a lot more frequently, and make sure your vacuum is 100% if you're going to run it without it. Otherwise, you're just going to create more problems later on. But from a cost perspective, look, they're not a huge thing. I know Husky did change them over to one that went under the chainring in the later days, probably for a similar reason, to prevent the failures that might have been happening around all of those machines. And they created other problems again, blocking up under the chainring where guys couldn't get the dust to come out when running on its back at the end of the day and things like that. So it had its own problems coming with that, but that was a solution they came up with to prevent failures on. But generally speaking, if a planetary seal stays on for a week, it's there for life, or until we decide to take it off.
It's a good one, guys. Always nice to see Hayden on. Are we going to wind things up there, or has anyone else got anything they want to stick in?
I think. Okay. Can we get us? No, we're not going to ask that question. That'll go on forever. These guys have got to get to relaxing and having a beer. Come on, guys. They've had a big week.
I have seen him with a cheeky cider of a Friday. Hayden,
Does happen.
He's a bit prone to a cider, and that might be just the thing before the cold weather really hits. Just that bit of a summery afternoon cider.
So I'm drooling a bit. Sorry, Mike.
No, thanks for coming on, mate. It's always good to see you, and I want you to have a think about that ideal machine for next time you're on, because I'd be really interested on just imagining this real sort of thing bolted together. So it'd be quite interesting to get a well thought out answer on that one. So we'll hold you to that. But thanks again for coming on, mate, and we'll catch you again soon, no doubt.
No problem. I'll go and play Transformers and see what I can work out.
Thanks, Hayden. Good to see you.
Everyone have a great weekend.
You too.
See ya.
See you guys.